So this segment we're going to be talking about the 100% mobilization, day one of Russia's drive to build its army. So this is from the 22nd of September. There's a lot of important stuff here to really discuss in this article and also in some of the other pieces I've read about this, which is I've seen some bad takes from people, in my opinion. My very arrogant opinion, but this is a very scary situation to be in for the average Russian who does not want to participate in this war. So summons delivered to eligible men at midnight, school teachers pressed into handing out draft notices, men given an hour to pack their things and appear at draft centres, women sobbing as their husbands and sons off to fight Russia's war in Ukraine. So essentially they're giving massive notices to people to appear at these draft centres. How many of these people will be drafted into the military is yet to be seen, but I think a lot of them would be forced to do basic training in case they are sent to the front. The first day of Russia's first mobilization since the Second World War, which shows you how bad the situation is over there, produced emotional showdowns at draft centres and even signs of protest when it appeared Russia could be considering far more than the 300,000 new conscripts claimed by the defense minister Sergei Shoigu. One woman in a small village of the Zamensky region in eastern Siberia said she first felt something was amiss when the dogs began barking. In a community of 450 people, the village head was walking from house to house seeking to hand out more than 20 draft notices as men gathered before departing the next morning. So they're going far and wide to find people to send for this war. She said some drank vodka while others hugged and told each other to stay safe. Women cried and made the sign of the cross over the small minibus that carried them away. So you can see it's a very distressing time for a lot of people who are being forced into the military right now. It's not a partial mobilization, it's a 100% mobilization, said Alexandra, president of the Free Boyatia Foundation, an activist group that has reported on the draft in the region. In the past day, she said she and her colleagues had received and identified more than 3,000 reports of draft papers being delivered in that region just within 24 hours of Putin's announcement. Despite assurances that Russia would be seeking men who had recently served in the military and had combat experience, activists pointed to a number of cases of men in their 50s receiving draft notices, and these are probably people who maybe were in the military at one point in their much, much younger days. I'm trying to think of recent Russian conflicts. There were a few. But these would be people way out of the military. People of 52 should not be on the front lines fighting directly. These are more general and officer ages, really. One woman said a 52-year-old relative had been delivered a draft notice shortly before the president announced the draft the previous day. So it's very clear that Putin wanted to serve these draft notices to people before his official announcement so that people couldn't run away as easily. Yanina, a journalist from Ulan-Ude in the Buryatia region, complained that her 38-year-old husband had received a draft notice despite never having served in the army. She said, don't you have 5 children? They asked him. My husband laughed. Yes, I have 5 kids. Well, okay, expect your draft papers. So essentially you can end up with 5 orphans here. They said, I understand that we have a quota. Our republic needs to gather 4,000 soldiers, said Nimavia in a video addressed to the region's governor. But some parameters and principles of this partial mobilization must be observed. So evidently there are some basic rules here, but they need to deliver 4,000 soldiers. That's what they've been told. So I'm guessing each region has been told to deliver a certain amount of soldiers for the war effort. During a televised interview on Wednesday, Shoigu said Russia would be targeting 300,000 draftees, mainly those with recent military experience. I mean, I'm sure they'll count people who play CSGO and Call of Duty as people having military experience at this point, but the actual number in an order signed by Putin is secret, so I reckon he wants a lot more than 300,000. But because Russia's so big, it'll be harder for people to know what the actual number is. Some think it could be higher. The independent Russian newspaper Novaya Gazeta Europe reported that a source in the presidential administration said Russia was seeking to draft more than 1 million people into the army. That's crazy. If they have the equipment to staff that many people, the resources, I don't know, but evidently they are looking at people to throw at this thing. That reporting has not been confirmed by the news outlets, but video and anecdotal evidence from around Russia shows large drafts taking place even in small towns, suggesting the number could be far higher. So that 300,000 number could be far off given the size of Russia. They're going to be recruiting far and wide. They're even going to the Caucasus regions as well. Many are in Russia's ethnic minority republics, reinforcing a sense that the country has been disproportionately relying on ethnic minorities to provide its main force in Ukraine. Those regions have suffered a disproportionate number of deaths and casualties from the war, especially when these are poorer regions as well that they're forcing into to fight for the Russian military. In Nelyungri, the second largest town in Sakha, also known as Yakutia, sorry pronunciations, a video footage appeared to show dozens of men being gathered at the football stadium and loaded onto buses bound for recruitment centres as families bid tearful farewells. Many of the men appeared to be in their 30s and 40s, and this could be just Russia trying to figure out who are the best draftees to bring into the military. And just trying to filter out who the best they can bring in right now, and maybe keep the rest on some sort of list. I don't know. It's very hard to know their motives at this point. They've already given out draft notices to workers from Kolmar and Mechal, two large mining companies with operations in the region, said activists who post the video. They were giving out draft notices all night, and it could be Russia could be making the mistake I think Britain made in World War One, where you bring in a lot of the people you need to keep funding the war effort, keep producing certain products and provide certain services to people. That was a big mistake Russia made in World War One, and I think that Britain made in World War One. During the kind of conscription period, and it looks like Russia aren't going something far off from conscription at this point. In Dagestan, a video appeared to show people angrily confronting an official arguing in favour of the draft at a recruitment centre. And we see that there are some people in Chechnya that are very happy to go to war. You got that dude, I can't remember his name, Ramzan Kadyrov, I think his name is. He was trying to show, I'm so proud going into Ukraine, and I don't think he was even in Ukraine. But there are a lot of people in Dagestan who obviously have Muslim faith, but they don't want to fight in this war. The official said that her son had been fighting in Ukraine since February. "You're fighting for your children's future," shouted the woman, who was not identified, in front of a crowd outside a municipal building. "We don't have a present. What kind of future are you talking about?" a man in the crowd responded. And they are not fighting for their children's future, not really, because this war that Russia are waging here, there's no win for them, not really. Even if they take large parts of Ukraine, right, best case scenario, they take the separatist regions and maybe a few others. This is not a win for Russia. They're going to face sanctions and other things that can push them back decades. Russia already a poor country. You've got oligarchs who are very reliant on the financial institutions that we have around the world to get their money out of the country and spend it on their lavish lifestyles. They have had issues moving their money around. It's not as hard as it should be, but it's a lot more difficult than it was. In Moscow, hundreds gathered to protest on downtown Arabat Street after Putin announced the mobilization. Police officers reportedly began giving draft notices to those detained at protest. And, for people who keep telling Russians, you need to go out and protest, you need to show the government that you're not happy, this is the result. For those people who sit on their high horse and say, why don't you just go and challenge the government and stuff like that? They live in a dictatorship. For anyone to advocate to take actions where it could lead someone else in jail or getting beaten or getting disappeared altogether, you're not a good person if you're advocating for others to get disappeared. It takes bravery to go to these protests. We're seeing that in Iran now. There are a lot of brave women going to their streets fighting for their rights here. And it's not a million miles off from Russia, who you have a lot of brave Russians going out on the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg and other places in Russia protesting against this war. But, this is what's happening. Some of them being arrested, being beaten, and then given draft notices by police. And if you don't turn up, it could be worse for you. I don't know what they'll do if you don't turn up to these when you're drafted. Among them was Artem Krieger, a youth reporter for the Sota Vision news outlet, who was detained despite being there to cover the protest. So they're even drafting in media at this point. All the men, absolutely everyone, was given a draft notice, said Krieger during an interview with TV Rain off from the back of a police van. That included men who had never served in the military, he said, who were now required to appear at their local recruitment centres. In a phone call with journalists, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov appeared to confirm that police were handing down draft notices to detainees. It does not violate the law, he said. That's madness. They're actually admitting this. You've got the Kremlin spokesperson admitting this to journalists, that this is not against the law, apparently, handing out draft notices. The breadth of mobilization across Russia is staggering. One video showed more than 100 potential draftees lined up behind an AN-12 plane at an airport in Kruba in the Far East region. One idea was that the local governor was keen to meet quotas like a schoolboy before the school teacher, Putin, said Garmaskova. And that's what seems to be the case here, that these people in charge of certain regions in Russia are probably under a lot of pressure from Putin in order to deliver results here and deliver people to the front lines. And that's why they're just handing out draft notices to people who have long, 40s and 50s. They're not the people who typically fight on the front lines in any war. They're very desperate, and I wonder genuinely question, will it get so bad that Putin will start drafting in women to the military? Will he get that desperate? He'll start trying to force women into the front lines. I genuinely don't know. There's a lot more I want to talk about here. Russia. You got lots of Russians fleeing to the border after the military call-up. So this was from a few days ago after the announcement. You've got massive queues of people. This is really shaky footage here, but you've got massive queues here, miles and miles of queues of people trying to escape Russia. You've got the Prime Minister of Estonia saying every citizen is responsible for the actions of their state and citizens of Russia are no exception. Therefore, we do not give asylum to Russian men who flee their country. They should oppose the war. But oppose the war and do what? Get put in prison, get beaten, get Thanos, get Hakkai'd? Is that what you want? Be sent to the front lines in order to extend the life of this war? This is genuine stupidity here. I don't want to be mean to a person, but genuinely this is a stupid idea. Obviously, people you give asylum to should be vetted because you want to be careful of who you're letting into the country, but they should absolutely be given asylum because this is one way to help end the war quicker. If there are less and less people to send to the front lines, this war ends. Because there's not much more Putin can do from there, apart from nuclear weapons, but I don't think it's going to go that far. At least I hope not. You got massive protests in Moscow and St. Petersburg, people chanting no to war. There are people saying, Russians are only doing this because they're losing now. I genuinely don't think this is the case. They were fed a huge diet of propaganda during the initial stages of the war, and wars typically have a rally around the flag effect, where even during the Iraq War, people rallied around the flag. And if you kind of question the war, you get called out as a traitor or an infidel, a heretic, a non-believer. You're a betrayer of the flag. But the longer wars go on, the more people realise the truth of a situation. And we saw that with the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, and we're seeing that here with Russia. Yeah, the average Russian person is very much struggling, but we're seeing more and more protests. And it takes bravery to go out to these protests, because like I said, you can get arrested very easily. You could lose everything you have very, very easily in these protests. So they are very brave here. You've got to the point where Russian convicts are being offered freedom if they join the war in Ukraine. I mean, that's wild. Slightly older, but they're going to prisons trying to recruit people, and now you've got people who have no military experience, right? Like I said, the most they have is probably playing CS:GO. Let's be honest here, given how popular that game is in Russia. They have very little military experience, and these are people that are being forced into the military here. It's just wild. Couple more things I want to talk about, which is Russian detainees expose Moscow police officer who tortured them. Anti-war demonstrators were tortured in Russia. Doesn't surprise me at all. And there's this guy here, William Spaniel, who does some decent content around the war. Far too many question marks, in my opinion, on his video titles. But, I've learned some interesting stuff from this video. And evidently, one of the things I learned, I can't remember which specific video it was, which is that the reason why he's doing this is because he needs a massive troop influx in order to try and counter the Ukrainian counterattack on Russia. The Russian invasion, or at least to hold on to what they have, which isn't glorious analysis, but I found it quite interesting that maybe Russia are just going to hold on to what they have at this point. I'm not sure. I did see a really good quote from Zelensky saying Ukraine will treat Russian deserters fairly. Zelensky vows, so I guess he's encouraging more and more Russians to desert the Russian military, to become prisoners of war effectively. Him saying Russian soldiers who surrender to Ukraine will be detained in a civilized manner. In his nightly address, he appealed to Russians to run away or surrender once at the front, which could be quite difficult. You could be shot in the back by your fellow Russian soldiers. You could be shot in the back by your commanding officer for desertion. You could be, whisked back to Russia and be imprisoned or worse, potentially. So there's a lot of outcomes for people who do surrender, but there are more and more kind of stories of mass groups of Russian soldiers just surrendering because they don't know what they're doing there. They haven't had the training, and I don't think they have the will to fight anymore, which is important. The propaganda needed in war for to push someone to take someone else's life is quite strong. Because I don't think killing comes inherently to human beings. Genuinely don't. But yeah, there's a lot I covered in this video, but Russia going for 100% mobilization, if that's the case, then they are desperate. And I don't know how much longer this war can go on. I don't know how much Ukraine can hold on. They are pushing back, which is great. It all depends on the winter now. And also how many people Russia can bring in, which would be quite interesting to see how many people actually do are forced into the military, but how many actually stay in the military, how many surrender, or how full are the Russian prisons at this point, where you've got so many people, right, who are protesting out on the streets. Russia can't arrest everyone, which is true, but I would never advocate for people to take actions where they can be put in prison or worse. I think that's a very stupid thing to do, especially when they could be given draft notices, etc. But anyways, let me know what you think of this in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This video has been going on for 15 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it here. Support the channel on Patreon if you can, and let me know what you think in the comments. As always, I'm kind of going back over what I've just said. I'll catch you next time.